That's from the first national anthem, not this current one.
Which people are singing more often these days.
Oh, really?
And I wonder why. I was at an event the other day and somebody said, let us sing the national anthem. I mean the old one.
Who?
Yes. And I'm wondering why. Is it that it's making more meaning to us now than it was then, or
And
what?
I suspect that whoever said that in that at that public event must have been an elderly person.
No, it was the young MC.
It's a lie.
Who wasn't even born when we were singing that national anthem. And he wanted to hear it. And he said, listen to the words of that anthem.
Well, I guess that line just...
That's the part that we're going to be talking about this morning. Though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand.
But they do differ.
Yes.
625 ways.
All 625 of them. Yes, and instruction has always been in English in this country, which sometimes can be embarrassing. You're at a gathering, especially when you're abroad, and you're all gathered together and you're speaking in English, and everybody else is speaking their language, so to speak. The Germans are globally away, and the Japanese are, and you are all speaking English, and they're looking at you and wondering, don't these ones have a language?
Yes, we do.
Well, the thing is that we have 625. So which one are we going to choose? So let's start with the meaning of mother tongue. Mother tongue is the language that the child comes into contact with, the first language that a child comes into contact with in life. It is through the mother tongue that the child establishes relationship with the immediate environment. It serves as a channel through which societal norms, values, and aspirations are transmitted to the younger ones. The Nigerian government recently approved a new national language policy that will mandate the use of local languages as a language of instruction for primary school pupils. That, to me, means that every Nigerian child will speak a Nigerian language. That is the bottom line for me. I am not an educationist. We have two of them in the studio with us this morning to look at this policy with us, and it's my pleasure to welcome Adedolapo Oshuntuyi, who is a child and education advocate. Good morning.
Good morning.
We also have Okeinfu Ajayi,
Yes.
also an educationist. Good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
First of all, let me ask you, so what language is it going to be at home?
I know, right? Because I'm from Edo State, and my husband is Yoruba.
So,
What language do your children speak now?
English. Sorry to say, but
I guess that's safe.
yes.
So you don't get like, oh, you taught your children.
I get it all the time.
What's your language?
It's Igara. So I'm from Igara, in Akoko Edo, yes.
You taught your children Igara, and they don't understand Yoruba. And I'm the man of the house. So you're not going to have that kind of problem, are you? So it's just safe to keep them speaking.
Fatherland.
What about you, ma'am?
Yeah.
They speak English.
I speak English, I speak Yoruba.
What about the children?
They started with English, but we are trying to infuse the Yoruba language.
Yeah.
It's a good one. My children by age 3 were already speaking proverbs
In Yoruba?
Wow.
Thanks to grandma.
Oh, okay.
I have to add that one.
So what are your thoughts about this policy? What do you think it's designed to achieve?
Well, looking at what they're trying to achieve is that from the position of the government, they feel is in the interest of the national unity for the children to learn their mother tongue languages, yeah. But it's really going to cause a lot of confusion, even for the children themselves. Because as of last week, I was still in a classroom setting, and the children were writing a Yoruba language examination, and the Igbos and the Hausas, they could not write it. So the teacher even came out, was reading the question, they could not still write it. And it's unfair because these children will feel left out as if the one they are speaking is much more better than theirs.
Okay. But doesn't that, sorry, I don't know. Isn't that a question mark on the kind of teaching that they got for that subject? Because, I mean, I assume that maybe at least they would have learned that kind of language, for instance, for about 3 months before they would sit down to write the exam. What do you think?
Well, another thing there is that how skilled is the teacher teaching them this? Imagine, because like what the policy said, public schools. These public schools we are talking about dominantly have large class sizes. I've been to a class of 200 children in a class.
Oh, God.
I can take you there. It's not far from where. I've been to a class of 200 children.
In one class?
Yeah.
Yes.
Primary or secondary?
Primary.
200 children in one classroom?
Primary.
That should not be allowed.
Primary.
Public school?
Yes. So imagine they don't have enough.
I'm sorry. What, did they bring all students together for one class, or that's just their norm on a day?
That's just the norm, and I think she can agree to that too.
Absolutely.
That's just the norm. They don't have enough tables and chairs. They're just sitting down, trying to squeeze themselves, maybe on a chair, and they don't have enough books. And probably they even came to school maybe just not well kitted for school. And the teacher is shouting. As a matter of fact, last week I just went there and stop making noise. Even the time I use in announcing stop making noise is already eating into the lecture time. So you can imagine the teacher is not well trained for this.
The teacher is already overwhelmed.
He's already overwhelmed.
Okay, madam, let me come to you, Mrs. Ajayi. First of all, to my colleague's question. What's your take on that policy?
So I look at it in 2 ways, right? The first is the preservation of our culture, and that's a good thing. The second is the fact that we need to look at the learning part of it. What is the benefit? Again, that's a good thing, because research does show that MTI, which is mother tongue instruction, is great. So it is good for the children. Now, the major question is, what is the government trying to achieve with that? So the government, from that policy statement, what they're trying to achieve is preservation of our culture. Yes, our heritage, because there's extinction of some of our local languages. So if we want to just, off the top of my head and just looking at our policy, that's what the government is trying to achieve with that. But we need to look at it from those two prongs, how beneficial. And then, of course, the implementation part of it. So let me stop for now.
I listened to the minister when he was announcing this thing, and he emphasized that in other climes, for instance, physics is taught in their languages. So who are those who are going to write us the physics books in Hausa and the physics books in Shekiri? Hausa is an established language. It's already, in
Igara, please add my language.
In Igara, yes. In Urobo. Who are those who are going to write all those textbooks for us? Have we looked at this thing that far?
I don't think so. I would say no. So in implementation, right, there needs to be a roadmap. And I do not even think that we have the so I'm a very data-driven person, and it's very important that we look at the data. What communities are we looking at, right? So for any policy, there needs to be a procedure to it. I do not, first of all, see the procedure. I heard the policy. There's no procedure. Your procedure is the way that policy is implementable.
I think that's actually where the minister stopped short, because he also seems to be at, but look, this is not something that has to be done. The how, which is the implementation. I think that's what's important. But you've also spoken, sorry, I
think that's why we're having this conversation as well, to give them some ideas as to how to implement it.
Because, perhaps, maybe we should start with the infrastructure around it. Soft infrastructure and the hard infrastructure that are going to be needed for this. In terms of soft infrastructure, what are the things, soft or hard infrastructure, what are the things that you think, if government is going to look at this, because I'm pretty sure it's not something they just slept and woke up in 2-3 months and say, okay, let's get this done.
They've been thinking about
this. And from research, it's also obvious that we've been talking about this for well over 4 decades. Now, in terms of infrastructure, what are the things that you would say, we need to do this, we need to do this, and then we need to do this so that this can happen?
So you said 2 things that are very important, and I would like clarity, just so that we're speaking on the same page. You said soft infrastructure and hard infrastructure. What exactly do you mean?
You spoke about, she spoke about capacity the other time.
Yes, okay, so that's under soft infrastructure. Okay, fine. I just wanted to be sure about that. So in terms of soft infrastructure, we need to first of all go back to our colleges of education.
Yeah.
Because that's where our teachers are coming from, right? We need to
prepare the teachers first.
Yes, if not, it's I'm sorry to use this word.
Prepare the books they're going to use to teach.
So that would be hard infrastructure. Because the publishers, for example, publish in English. So where is the financial outlay for them to begin to break it up into different languages in the community?
And then we need to select the languages.
We need to first of all even define what we mean by national language within a community. So, so already, which my colleague alluded to, we have an access problem because we do not have sufficient infrastructure. Let me just draw a picture. In Lagos State, for example, we have quite a number of public schools, but not every community has a public school.
Yeah.
So sometimes you would have some children move in about 20 minutes to get to school. Research says if a child has to move 20 minutes to get to school, learning and even their want to go to school is depreciated by about 50-something%.
Whoa.
So that already is problematic, right? And then now we're saying my community, so in Lagos State, for example, you have different ethnicities and different dialects within a community. So which one becomes the dominant one? So we need to have that definition. When we have then had that definition, we need to then ensure that what? The homes.
Yeah.
I teach my children learn in school, but guess what? They come back home, and I need to do some work with them as well. And so if there is no forum,
that's the dilemma of every parent.
Look,
Mother tongue.
Yeah. What is it?
You know, when she was talking just now, another thing just crossed my mind. Okay, so she's Edo. Her husband is Yoruba. You are Yoruba.
I'm Yoruba. I'm from Ekiti. My husband is from Ondo. And don't let us forget that Ondo, based on what I heard, different streets with different languages. So how many languages are we talking about?
You know, I said it. No. Of all the languages, so what did I say?
I haven't even landed yet. And you already taken me somewhere entirely. I haven't even landed yet. Because what I was going to say, okay, look, I'm Shekiri.
Okay.
Married a Shekiri man. I have a neighbor who is Urobo, but we all live in Lagos, and our children are going to go to school in Lagos. So in what language will the children be taught?
Yeah. I know.
She sighs.
So, okay, now, let me...
you don't know.
Alero, she just gave you an example. In Edo, in Ondo State, maybe there are 50 languages.
Yeah.
In Ondo State, 1 state. So which one will be the dominant?
Oh,
so I don't know if you can teach them in Ondo with Yoruba or Ibadan or your Ibadan Yoruba.
Well, with the...
Just for example.
With the Yoruba that we know, the one that is normally written.
No, I don't think that will happen.
The language of instruction.
Should be, but I don't think that will happen. I don't know. I don't know if you can speak to...
Then I
no, but the thing is, we just want those children to speak the language.
Okay.
We don't care whether it's a dialect or do we? They speak a Nigerian language. That's the most important thing.
It is.
I mean, I would assume.
Well, you are right. But then we're talking about the implementation. You started this conversation around the soft infrastructure the other time, training the teachers, training the trainers of these children. In what direction do you think government will be looking at? Because in my head, when I saw the national language policy, it tells me covertly there has to be some adjustment to the national education policy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what do you see happening in that regard?
Well, shall I say, I'm not too sure how to answer, because why I said so is that they came up with this national language policy now, but I don't think they've actually even thought it through. Because number one, like what she said, I'm going to pick from where she stopped. Aside the instructional material that they have to spend time developing, the syllabus, you know, and even when it comes to even the teacher writing the lesson plan, that means it has to be in the language. And I think working with many schools, I know looking for language teacher is a big deal.
It is.
We don't have enough language teacher. So now it goes back to our colleges of education, our universities too. How many children, how many youth are willing to say, I'm going to school to study Yoruba or Hausa? Even
what Mamadou did?
That was how many eons ago?
even my friends, you know, when we are talking, oh, I'm studying medicine. It's more or less like, you know, you're showing off what you're studying. We don't have people say, oh, I'm studying Yoruba. I can count. When I was in uni, I can't remember anybody telling me they study Yoruba. So it's already, you know, it's like, it's a structural thing that we need to sit down and come up with a procedure to know, oh, okay, we're going to start with inviting even the lecturers, the teachers of universities, whether in polytechnic, they'll have to be on the table discussing with the government, not them coming up with a policy in silo, leaving the real people working in the grassroots out of it.
But Dolakwa, don't you think that this will change as time goes on? Because they will know that there is employment for them. Right now, they're not studying Yoruba because what am I going to do with it?
I know you have a point on that, but really, I'm trying to figure out for how long I've been reading this in news. After this government now, when another government comes in, is there going to be a continuity?
The policy may
that
change.
Thing I've started is well dated back to as far as 1984. How come we are still coming up with the issue, the same thing that is in the report, that is the same thing that is coming up again?
Okay, madam, you spoke about...
Don't you think that this is one of the things that just has to stay? Because we all stand to benefit from it. We can't afford to lose our languages. That is not on. Because 100%. English cannot be our mother tongue.
100%. I do agree that it is not a bad thing, to be honest, right? Because, so let me use my niece as an example. My niece is, so my brother married somebody from Urobo, you know, and he only speaks my language to her. Only. And her mom speaks English. She's very strong. Her thinking is she's amazing. So it's good. Mother tongue instruction is great. The how of it is what we need to look at. It then means that in the universities, when you're teaching or studying education, you're going to have to recreate those materials. The lecturers would have to teach in specific languages as well. Because the way education is a very social type of learning. The way my teacher teaches me is the way I sort of go into the classroom and teach like that.
And it makes you want to study
because
that subject.
It's a model. I'm seeing my teacher's model and I'm like, okay, so when I then go into the classroom, this is how I need to teach. So it is great, to be honest, because the language is bad. My children are on YouTube learning how to speak Yoruba, learning how to speak Igara, because somebody has developed those instructions there. But before we jump into this, I would say, can we sort of run a pilot? Can we say, oh, from nursery school into the primary school, can we begin to say, let us introduce this as clubs and make these clubs mandatory?
So essentially you're saying we need to, I should use the word, catch them young. Now, we'll get to that, and I hope we still have enough time. But you spoke about data the other time, and I'm very curious. 625 local languages minimum, according to the Minister of Education, at the federal level. We don't know what the commissioners of each state will come up with, what numbers they are going to give. So in terms of selecting, in terms of going through this process, there are at least 3 categories of communities in every state. Urban communities, suburban communities, rural communities.
That's right.
If we are to use data or some kind of sifting, methods, how would you suggest that government looks at selecting the instructional languages? Because I know it's a tough call.
It is.
You know, and
I don't want to shoot myself in the foot.
don't we'll wear bulletproof for you.
So, I mean, I would say that in every community, there is a dominant language. You know, there always is a dominant language. And typically, it would be, if you look at the ballet, so let me use the Lagos State example. If you can look at the ballet of certain communities, the language that they speak typically is the dominant language and the dialect in that community. So perhaps we can start with that, right? Because it then means that within that community, because more people are speaking that way, the other people sort of integrate that language into their understanding so that they can, you know, relate. Relate properly. So that would be the way that I would say perhaps government begins to look at it, but then it needs to go down into those grassroots and say, what are these communities? Who are the ballets? What are the dominant languages? Can we then begin to create sort of a structure around these things? But yeah, it's like scrambled eggs right now, but, you know.
Do you see because fearfully, I say this fearfully, there are very few things in our country as of today that are not politicized, so to speak.
Yeah.
How do you see us circumventing that in a way that one ballet or community leader, as you put it, is not influenced to go against himself or herself?
Yeah. So that's a tough one, to be honest, which is why, again, it goes down to the structure of things, right? Beyond just the ballet, there are local government champions within every community, you know, so we're then going to have to look at it. It's almost like back then when we said, when the communal masters came and they were like, how are things happening in the East? What exists currently? And then sort of build on the structure that what exists, right? So in terms of politicizing things, there's always the fear of that. I mean, this policy came from the FEC level. I don't understand how that happened, but we're not going to go there. You know, so there's always that sort of political inclination to things, but with sufficient stakeholder engagement, with sufficient policy, stakeholder education, then we might be able to manage, you know, the sort of politicizing that we might begin to see.
But, go on.
Let me stay with you. I'm thinking this way ahead of probably those who made this policy are thinking, because I'm thinking about the WAEC exam, for instance. How do you see that playing out?
So
I'm even trying to I'm trying to translate Boyle's law in my head.
So they did mention that
chemistry,
from secondary school,
chemistry is going to be in different languages.
It's going to switch. No, so they did mention that it's going to switch in secondary school
to English.
So that sort of answers that question. So the one that would be a little shaky is the common entrance examinations into the model colleges. So
yeah.
So
of course, we're to assume that while they're learning in these languages, instruction is also being given to them in English, so that their English also does not suffer because they're going to need that later.
Yes.
It's interesting.
It's getting a bit confusing now.
Because what you just said now reminds me of a classmate of mine when I was in, I think, Form 1 or Form 2. Yes, that's what we called it that time, not SS1, SS2. This guy, I don't remember the class. When he was going to, he's a Yoruba boy, when he was going to call silver, he said Silifa. But okay, so madam, I just wanted to, and it's in Oyo town. Yes, I'm from Oyo State. So, madam, I want to ask you two things in one.
Okay.
One, how will these children receive these? Let's begin with that. How do you see children receiving, this policy themselves? Because at the end of the day, it's about them. And it sounds like government is literally, as Alero said, looking forward. So how will a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old who is already used to alpha blocks, number blocks, and all those games on technology, we'll come to the technology part later, how do you see them receiving instructions in ABD? Just using Yoruba. Because for now, most of them are taught sounds, not alphabets. Please go ahead.
So I'm going to start with this. I remember recently my daughter had to change her school because the school closed down. And that was at second term. So we just assumed she understood and she is going to another school. She should be excited about it. And she busted into tears. She said, Mommy, I'm not ready for this.
At what age?
At what age was she?
9 years old.
Jesus.
Wow. Wow.
And when I started talking to other parents, one said the child fell sick for over a week. And she was like, is it over this changing of school? To tell you that the identity, building the identity of a child also has a very pivotal role in, you know, the environment, like the school system they are involved with. So you can imagine a child that comes up with excitement to write assignments, now coming home that I have to write it in Yoruba.
Or Hausa.
Or Hausa.
Or Nupe.
You know, number one, it won't fascinate their desire to even want to learn what you're teaching them. Because even the one in English, you have to get extra help. Like maybe the ones that can afford getting extra lesson teacher to do that. How much more? And to be sincere, the first time I picked up, I think it was after I left, I was about entering uni that I realized there's actually a Yoruba past question. And when
maybe they won't start from age 9. Maybe the policy will begin from lower.
Yes.
Maybe it's for those who are just entering creche. Let's start the policy from 2020 whatever or 2030 whatever, and let's start from the bottom.
But what I read online says that it's going to be exclusively for the first 6 years. I mean, primary school. So
that's
now,
what I'm saying.
So now,
so she's gone past that already.
No. She's in primary 6 now, and by the time she gets to primary 6, she'll be 10.
2 years to go.
Yes. And then now, when we want to consider and she goes to a private school, now let's consider the public school. I have 9-year-old, I have 10, I have 17 in primary 4. Yes.
Yeah.
We have 17-year-old in primary 4.
17, she should be doing her A-levels already.
We have 17-year-old in primary 4. So even trying to interpret that to them is going to come as a shock. It will disturb their mental state, their psychological state. Yeah.
Madam, I want to ask about the technology part of it. I don't see how we can get past technology in this age and time. Never. We can never anymore live our lives without technology. And clearly, the days of blackboards are gone. Now we have, do you call them magic boards?
Interactive, like
interactive, you know, tablets, iPads, and all those things. We'll come back to infrastructure, right? How we will prepare the softwares, code in Igala language, in Igbo language, in Ikwere, in Shekiri, and all those languages and all. So, what challenges do you see, especially at a time when most of the time there are those who believe that government generally doesn't like to patronize Nigerian stuff. They would rather get them imported. But we don't have English, or rather Ikwere or Igala speaking Germans who prepare these apps and technology things for us.
So with artificial intelligence, there is that I mean, if you go on your Google Maps these days, there's this voice. It's changed now, right? So with artificial intelligence, you know, we can sort of scale that hurdle slightly quicker than we would have a few years ago, because it's quite it's great right now. So in terms of technology, that can be done. That's the hardware of technology. But in terms of then the teaching of the technology is then where we might have a problem, right? Because it means that I'm going to have to translate all of my instructional manuals into the different languages, and that could be problematic. Yeah, it could be problematic.
Is Osun State ahead in any way? Remember they had this thing called Okmo Imo.
Yeah.
When
knowledge tab.
Ogbeni was there.
So you do have, you know, so I'm not very familiar with what is happening in that particular one. But if that has happened, then that tells you that there are people who are already sort of
thinking in that direction.
Thinking in that direction, yes, and moving ahead with that. So in terms of that conversion, that hardware, it might not be it's a difficult thing to do, to be honest, right? It's then the instructional part of it that can
So it goes back to the teachers, as
yes, it is. It does.
Madam mentioned earlier. So how do we get, because clearly what we're seeing, the challenges that we have listed here so far are, one, selecting the languages, and you say it has to be data-driven.
Yeah, it has to.
In order to eliminate the political ambit of it. Number two, soft and hard infrastructure. Yeah. Now, let's speak to, I think she began the conversation around the colleges of education earlier. If government is to go around this, what are the things that, if you give government a checklist, that need to be considered now, if we're going to fast track this, and how long do you think it'll take?
So three things that I would, because there's several things, but three things that I would say government needs to begin to look at is, where are the current colleges of education situated? We don't have quite a lot of them spread out, so we need to look at that, and we begin to then look within the communities that we need to run a pilot. I don't think we should just jump in. Yeah, I think it will be wrong. So decide on where we want to run a pilot, decide, okay, so where are the colleges of education? If there's none in those indigenous communities, we need to, right? Because language is cultural. It's not just speaking of it. They're the inflections. So there's so much more involved in language, which the teachers need to understand those things. So they need to be domiciled sort of within the community so that they can sort of take that on. That's the first thing that needs to happen. The second thing is then to say, where are the public schools currently located? It then means that we need to look at infrastructure because of access. Because if we have a problem with access, then we already have failed at the beginning of this year. So that's the second thing that we need to begin to look at in terms of where are the schools located. The third thing that I would say is we need to look at the curriculum, which sort of follows from these teachers and what they're learning in the colleges of education. And an addendum to that is then the instructional materials. We need to begin to develop them now. So timeline, I would say they should look at, to be honest, maybe another 6 to 10 years. Yes, and just like you said, Madam, we cannot say we're going to implement it all across all the classes in secondary school. No, we need to say, okay, you know what, nursery 1, which is maybe our 3 to 4 year olds. Let's start with these coming in. Yes, and then we begin to grow that.
Push them up.
Yes, that's what I would say.
There is the National Teachers Institute, for instance. I mean, you both have spoken to College of Education and all those things. What should happen with teachers, especially the current one? Because if we're going to do anything extra, there are those who believe that you know what someone will do by what the person has done before. Given the way we have treated teachers as a nation, irrespective of what level, up until now, what would you propose?
I'm going to continue from where she stopped. Funding is very important. We can't... A government that wants to be successful with this kind of program cannot shy away from the funding aspect of it. And the funding, training, because when you mentioned the National Teachers Institute, I'm currently running a program.
Okay.
So, and it's also with the National Teachers Institute I'm running a program. So, and funding, such that you make the course education looks so exciting that everybody wants to associate with. To be sincere, before I decided, it took me 10 years to consider that I want to do a program in this line. And before, I would say I don't want to be a teacher. Because they're always portraying them to look as if, they are just, I don't want to use the word, but...
Beggarly. Please.
You understand? And so...
Especially because now that you are in their space, you understand.
We're running completely out of time. I'm sorry, that's the nature of live television. So I have to take your last word now.
Okay.
Your last word on this.
Wow. I would suggest...
Oh, it looks like we've got some more time.
Oh, really? Okay. So,
yes, so go ahead.
I was going to ask you, since you are in the space with the teachers now, it will seem, what would you propose? What's the current state now that government needs to really review? Because there is no one government that can do this on its own. What would you suggest what are the circumstances or conditions of learning for teachers that you feel need to be improved if this policy is to go anywhere?
Yeah, I mentioned funding the other time. I also mentioned the fact that, you know, teaching, it's really like all of us, we're on this stage today because we went through a school, we passed through a school. And right now, we have different people involving themselves in education, even though that's not their background. Some, like in the rural community, SSC, the person is already teaching, without even going through the normal route of, okay, you going through a college of education, we understand the rudiments of teaching. So I would say that they should build more structure around student youth going for courses like this. And even the teachers that are already trained, or let's say the past years, they should put a policy in place such that, I mean in the public sector now, I know Lagos State is really doing a lot, but can we speak of other states? When last, I know of teachers that have conversed in the last 1 month, when last did they even go for a training? And when you call them, there are times that even my organization will organize like a free training for teachers. I mean, even how many of them turn up for that? So there should be like a policy that will enforce them that it has to be part of your KPI, that you need to go more for this training. And I believe the more they go for trainings like this, the more they will have the capacity to want to express themselves. You can't give what you don't have. So that is very, very important. And the more they work on even the past modules that are being used in these schools, you know, make it more adaptable. It also spurs the interest of teachers to want to, you know, go deep in that. So I will not shy away when it comes to that teachers aspect, because
improved remuneration, wouldn't that also help?
Yeah, that's why I started with funding.
No, funding could be funding the sector.
Yes.
Okay.
And so putting money into teaching the students, getting them all the equipment that they need, getting them the books that they need. That could be funding. You need to specify. Remuneration. Pay the teachers better.
Yes.
The one other question comes to mind, madam. There are many parents today who are in their 30s. Why are you laughing? I've not even asked my question. She's already laughing. Who don't understand their local language? You knew that's where I was going.
Yeah.
So, how do they go
speak it to their children?
Because children will always come back home with homework.
Yep.
And the mother does not understand her own mother tongue, and she has to instruct her children in this mother tongue with assignments and all of that. So you tell a 29 or 30-year-old teacher to translate Ojotoro to Palapamole.
Wow.
Okay, sorry. Wow. So how do you see that happening? What's the role of parents in this?
To be honest, parenting is critical. There's research that says that a child that has two adults that are consistently that are consistent in their lives do better than a child who has just one being the teacher and the second being the parent. So parenting, we cannot take that out of the equation, right? And this is problematic, to be honest. And there are two dimensions to this, right? The first is that we have assumed with this question that the mother tongue is the one that the parents have. So that's the first one. I can import grandma. Maybe help out with that one. I mean, grandma supported you guys, right? Exactly. But then the second one is if that mother tongue is not even the indigenous one for the parents, but it's the one for the community. Now that is going to be problematic, right? So that's why instructional materials need to be developed before you can ever go into this. And there needs to be the parenting angle as well. So perhaps we parents too will go back to school so that we can support our children.
YouTube is your friend.
YouTube is okay. You know, there are many geniuses born to stark illiterate parents.
Absolutely.
Yep.
How do you explain that? I mean, the child has received no help whatsoever from the parents, because the parents don't even, when she comes home or he from school and says A, B, C, what is that?
When even the parent does not understand ABD.
Thank you. So, how do you explain that?
It's something, to be honest, that is not, it's not explainable. It's something to do with the DNA of the child. It's something to do with their rapid brain development. So that's neurology, which is another field totally entirely.
It's not your field.
You know, no, it's not my field. But to be honest, it's not something that you can explain. But they're just certain neurons in the brain. Absolutely, it happens. So my 4-year-old nephew, for example, if you ask him 322,000 times 4, he goes like that, and you're like, how did you do that? Even his mom is like,
I don't know.
This is not from me. So it does happen, but it's a phenomenon that it's difficult to explain. It's just something that is very well developed in the child. Sometimes, and I'm not saying that's the case all the time, we have high-performing Asperger's, but I mean, that's going again into neurology and special needs education, which is not the conversation that we're having today. But it is something that...
Will that not limit some children?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's the root of the question. Because if there is that, perhaps we also need to recognize, and you said this quite copiously, there is that mindset about local languages. They are vernacular. They are inferior.
No speaking of vernacular.
No speaking of vernacular. They are, those local languages are inferior. You speak Yoruba, you are an under whatever it is in any community. So such a genius, for instance, now has to learn in local language as well. Do you see it as something limiting or something, I don't know, it's a lot of work, right?
Yeah, so I mean, just looking on the surface of it, I would say that there could be some limitations that you would find, because that means that it's almost like a child who left-handedness and right-handedness, right? And then the child is left-handed, and then you're forcing them to use their right hand. So it's sort of those sort of things, because that limits the child's brain development because of the way it is, right? So there is the fear that this is a problem. So before we go into this, which is why there needs to be massive education, massive engagement, people need to understand the mindset and begin to change that mindset. For example, if you're on the bus, maybe outside of this country, you're hearing, like you mentioned, the Germans are speaking Germany quite loudly and they don't care. The Chinese are doing the same thing, but then we're speaking Yoruba and we're like, let's say it small. Why? So it is a mindset thing. It is, again, we would say maybe colonial mentality of the fact that it is vernacular. It's beneath you. Why are you talking like this?
When in fact, English is the vernacular. Come.
Well, time has run out this time, and for real this time. So let me take your last word. Okay?
Context. Context is my last word. We can't do things in silos. We must say what is the context within which we want to implement. If we look at the right context and we bring it in, we will succeed at this. So context.
Yeah, I know the idea the government is trying to do is to catch them young, and that's why they're starting with the primary school. So I feel, just like what she said, we should start from the elementary stage.
Pre-primary school.
Yeah, pre-primary element, just to inspire them and get them motivated to want to take it up.
Very interesting conversation. Thank you very much for coming. Okeyinfo Ajayi, an educationist, and Adedolapo Osuntui, child and education advocate. Thank you very much for coming to have this very, very, very interesting conversation with us this morning.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for staying with us at home. We'll be right back with another interesting conversation. Do make sure you join us.